This is the J. Scott Outdoors podcast on Western big game hunting and fishing, and I'm your host, J. Scott. I live and breathe hunting and fishing, spending half the year in the field enjoying God's creation. I hope you'll enjoy hearing about our adventures. Welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Today we're fortunate to have a mule deer nut with us. We've got Brec Bundy from Washington, Utah. Brec owns and operates MDA Outfitters, which stands for Mule Deer Addiction Outfitters. Brec is known for harvesting some of the largest bucks off the Arizona Strip every year, and Brec has actually guided 4 people that I know personally himself to, I believe, all bucks over 200 inches. Mr. Brec Bundy, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, Jay. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. I'm looking forward to having you here with us and letting some of my listeners hear about your passion for mule deer and the love that you share for those animals in that area. Brec, why don't you give me a little background on you and tell me about your family and your kids and how many you've gotten, etc.
Gotcha. I've got 3 boys, believe it or not. Our youngest is 11 months old, and it was our try for a little girl, as my wife put it. But
her last stand for a little girl.
Her last stand for a little girl. But my oldest boy, Aiden, is 8 years old, and then my middle boy, Crew, is 5, going on 6. He'll be 6 in another month. And then my youngest, like I said, was Jax. He's 11 months, almost a year old. Crazy how fast they grow up.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Brec, why don't you give me a little background on how you started hunting, your location to the Arizona Strip and growing up and such, I believe you guys have property on the Arizona Strip. Give me a little background there.
Okay, yeah, we do have property on the Strip, but it's kind of interesting. My grandpa, on my dad's side, obviously, my grandpa Bundy was actually born and raised out on the Arizona Strip. What they refer to, a lot of people call it Bundyville now, but Mount Trumbull. They have the Mount Trumbull schoolhouse right there and whatnot, but they homesteaded the property, and he was born and raised there and didn't move into St. George until I believe he was 18, 19 years old or something like that. But so it obviously got me, I grew up, it's home away from home out on the Strip, and I spend pretty much all my free time out there, filming, photographing, looking for sheds, you name it, hunting coyotes, we do a lot of that, and chasing lions. We just got back from a lion hunt last Tuesday and killed a cat. So.
And Brec, how you live in Washington, Utah, which for my listeners, give me a little bit of geography lesson on where you live in relation to the Arizona Strip. You obviously live in Utah, but we're talking about the Arizona Strip.
Correct. Yeah, St. George. Most people are familiar with St. George, Utah. It's right in the far southwest corner of the state. Washington's just kind of a suburb of St. George, and we're only, I would say 2 or 3 miles, 4 miles from the Arizona state line, and so it's just a real short drive from my home to the Strip. So,
gotcha. So ever since you were just knee high to a grasshopper, you've been bouncing around all over the Strip.
I have. My dad, I was really lucky. My dad loved being on the Strip and loved taking me and my brothers and stuff out and hunting rabbits or filming or doing whatever. And so I learned at a young age a lot of the Strip, and learned the roads and where the deer hang and stuff like that. But.
Well, I can honestly say, having hunted with you, I was up there fortunate to go for 4 or 5 days on Daniel Franco's hunt a couple years ago. He had a 13B tag, and you were guiding him. I had a chance to be around you in your camp and meet your brother and meet your dad and some of your friends, and it was just a pleasure being in your camp. I can truly say that I feel like I'm one of the faster drivers that I know off-road and can, get from point A to point B, but I truly feel like I move in slow motion compared to the speed which you travel. That was quite an experience.
Yeah, we know the road pretty well, and definitely move pretty quick when we're trying to get from one spot to another. That's for sure.
Yeah, one of the things when you gave me the map where we were camping, and you said, well, gas up and be ready to go when you leave St. George, and I think it was like 90 some miles or something to where we were camping, and I was just like, 90 miles? What am I going back into? I'm halfway back to Phoenix.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty crazy. The strip is just so big and vast, and in that particular spot where we were hunting, we were, like you said, we were 90 plus miles out, and pretty close to the Grand Canyon. I mean, we were right there on the edge of it for sure.
And if I remember right, a story that you told me, and the details are fuzzy, but I remember it being a great story, and I'm sure you have a bunch of stories. Before we actually get into the mule deer, all the stories about the mule deer, I believe you were scouting maybe when you were a kid or something, and a quad broke down or a truck broke down, and you ended up riding a quad or something like 50-some miles back to town, or there was some elaborate story. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. It was actually me and my dad and my brother Bronson, who you met. We actually went out it was in the winter, and we actually went out to do a little coyote hunting. And my dad at the time had an old 1979 two-wheel drive Toyota pickup.
And how old were you and Bronson roughly at the time?
I was probably 12 years old. Bronson would have been 8 or something like that. But we made it we went up on Mount Trumbull, which is on 13A, which we'll probably get into a little later. But we went up there and we made it up just fine. And then the sun came up and it started, it had snowed and stuff, and the roads were just a mess. And it warmed up, and we actually ended up got stuck right on the road. Like, we just couldn't go. We couldn't go forward, couldn't go backwards. It was just a muddy mess. And so we actually had an old 1985 Honda three-wheeler. Big red three-wheeler that we had to unload, and me, my dad, and my brother drove it all the way back into St. George.
That's unbelievable. All three of you on one of those. That's awesome. And I'm sure you have other stories like that. Brec, why don't you give me a little bit of a breakdown between 13A and 13B, starting off with 13A, and give me a little bit of a geography lesson on, maybe the boundaries of 13A and some of the characteristics in 13A as maybe it compares to the geography and some of the terrain and bucks and what have you of 13B.
Gotcha. 13A is Fredonia, Arizona. If your listeners are familiar with Fredonia, once you come into Fredonia, you cross the Kanab Creek, and that's kind of the east border of 13A. So the Kanab Creek is a tributary that runs down into the Grand Canyon, and then the border, the north border of 13A is Highway 89 that runs from Fredonia to Pipe Springs to Colorado City, down into Hurricane, Utah, and then obviously into Utah. But the border on the west is the Hurricane Rim, or the Hurricane Fault Line, that splits 13B and 13A on the west side.
Okay.
And as far as the bucks are concerned in both units, I mean, obviously both produce some giant deer. I personally prefer 13B over 13A just because of there's more country to hunt, in my opinion.
Is it geographic as far as size, or just pockets of deer? There's more deer in B than A.
There are typically more deer on 13B, and geographically there's more huntable country, more country to hunt on 13B. 13A, there's a lot of antelope country out on the north side of the unit, wide open flats and whatnot.
Okay.
And so generally there's more deer on 13B, more places to hunt because of the terrain and the country and stuff like that. But 13B, actually, like I said, on the east side of 13B, the Hurricane Rim that runs all the way into Hurricane, Utah and beyond, that's the east border of 13B. The north side is right here out of St. George, just south of St. George, runs all the way over to, across I-15 and into the Virgin River Gorge, and goes all the way down to the Nevada border on the west and south side, and the Grand Canyon basically is the border on the south side of 13B.
And is the south border of 13A pretty much the Grand Canyon National Park as well?
It is.
Okay, and then historically speaking, the old timers that used, Ted Riggs and, a bunch of the old timers that, used to, your grandpa and all those guys that used to hunt out there a lot. I mean, was the Arizona Strip was it ever just one unit and they just called it the Strip, or how did it get it divided from A to B, or maybe you don't even know? I don't know.
I don't know that right off the top of my head. I know that a lot of guys, some guys that I've guided just in recent years, just this last year on 13A, he actually used to come up when he was, younger, just out of high school or whatever, and hunt the Strip. And he always talked about hunting on 13B down around Mount Dellenbaugh. So I don't know when they split that or why they did or just what. Gotcha.
And historically have bucks, and we're talking in the lifespan of the Strip, I mean, historically have equally as amount of big bucks come off of A as in B, or did A used to be better than B, or has B always been, in your mind, or what you know of history, has B always been a little bit better?
Honestly, as far as the caliber of bucks, I think, 13A has produced just as big a deer as 13B. And just depending on the year, the one thing with 13A is the deer will migrate from 13A down onto 13B. Like we actually, I believe it was 2011, there was a buck that actually summered at our property up on Mount Trumbull up on 13A, and we ended up killing him during the rifle hunt on 13B, 15 miles from where he summered. And so you will have a lot of deer that will migrate off of 13A and stuff like that. But historically speaking, I would say, there's been just as big a deer killed on 13A as there has on B. And so it just kind of depends on the year, obviously, and whatnot. But this last year, for instance, we were hunting a buck on 13A that we figured was around 240 inches. And so,
wow,
a great buck.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking about bucks, let's talk about what you're seeing. We're looking at March 3rd, beginning of March here. We just had a nice storm come through. What is the forecast for 15 from a moisture standpoint? How have you seen have the storms been timely, or how was the winter? Give me a little range conditions.
Gotcha. We, obviously we had that really dry, warm from January. We had one storm come in January, like around the 1st of January. And it produced a lot of snow. I mean, it snowed, even here in St. George, which doesn't happen a whole lot, but we had that really good storm. And then we just had this storm that came through that it was a warmer storm. It put some snow down, but it was a lot of rain and whatnot. And I think with these two storms, combined with the summer we had last year, I think we're going into this 2015 season in a really, it's going to be in really good shape. And obviously, if we could get another storm or two from now till May, I think it could be phenomenal. And just that, with some of the bucks that made it through, I think, like I say, I think it could be a phenomenal year.
Fantastic. Can you compare it from what you're seeing or what you can forecast now? Is there a particular year that you can compare it to, or are you just going to stick with it? It's just going to be a great year.
I would love to say it's going to be another 2010, which any of your listeners out there that follow the Strip know it was just unbelievable. I mean, I've never seen anything like a 2010 season. There was like 13A. We were talking about 13A bucks. I mean, there were literally like 10 220 plus bucks killed in the first 3 days of that 2010 season, and it was just phenomenal, and that all was due to the weather, obviously, and the rut conditions and whatnot. But I would love to say a 2010 season, but I won't go out there and say that it's going to be that good.
Yeah, my question would be, 2010, and I'm not a strip expert at all. I mean, I have 12 points and I keep applying for it, but and only having been up there one time on Daniel's hunt with you, no, I shouldn't even really be talking about it. But from what I remember in 2010, the timing of the 13A with the rut, it just seemed like the big bucks were on those does, and they just slayed them in A that year, and probably one of the best years ever. My question is, since a bunch of those big bucks got shot, have you seen the decline in A as far as quality? And with that many big bucks being shot, is it safe to say that maybe we might not ever see that quality of bucks in 1 year taken?
Yeah, I mean, I would say we can and will probably see a year like that again. Obviously, after that 2010 season, 13A was kind of, all the biggest bucks that we knew about, most of them were taken. And then it was kind of slow the last few years, but 13A is kind of on coming back a little bit, if you will, as far as, the size of bucks and whatnot. And so I think that we will see another 2010 season, or similar to it. It may be, 13B may have a phenomenal year. Like, in 2008, I hunted with our mutual friend Randy and Ron Charrington. And, 13B that year, we saw some rut activity, right off the bat. We had an early storm in late October that came in, and I think it just got those bucks, or those does, I guess, really going, and the bucks were hot on them. And so 2008 was a phenomenal year in my opinion as well.
And so what I hear you saying is, and for the listeners, 13B hunt is always, I don't want to say always, but as far as I can remember, is usually in front of the 13A hunt. Typically, the 13A hunt, you get a little bit more rutting activity, but you're saying in 2008 that you actually had a good storm just before the season that got those does moving around, and obviously the bucks were acting ruddy. How much of that do you think is temperature and weather related, and how much of it do you think is just timing? I mean, seems like a perfect case to say that if it gets cold and you get some snow and stuff, that they could turn on.
Yeah, they do, and you're right. The 13B hunt always starts the week before A. So Arizona, they kind of stagger the hunts. You have 13B that starts first up here, and then 7 days later the 13A hunt starts, and then right after that you have some of the Kaibab units, 12B, 12A. Start the following week. And so I think a lot of it is kind of weather dependent. Obviously, like I said, 2008, we had some snow. I was actually out on the strip. I think it was a couple weeks before the hunt actually started, but we got some snow and a real cold snap that came through. And I think that in and of itself kind of got those does, got them in heat, and those bucks obviously followed. And so it made for a phenomenal hunt.
Brec, if you would go through a handful of the bucks. I mean, you mentioned the Charrington last year. Brian Rims's dad, Skip, good friend, mutual friend, shot a really nice buck. Spencer Porter's wife a couple of years back shot a nice buck. Obviously, Daniel Franco got a nice typical. Go through some of those bucks and give me some scores, give me some measurements, kind of walk through some of the best bucks that you've been a part of.
Gotcha. Back in 2005, I had the pleasure of guiding a Mississippi native. His name was Jeff Graves, and this was his, he was a big-time hunter, but it was his first mule deer hunt, and it was back, you probably remember, and your listeners may not know this, but Arizona was actually, I guess you could call it sued or whatever, because they have a 10% cap on non-residents. Anyway, that was done away with in some court ruling or whatever for, I think, a 2-year period, or one might have just been the 1 year in 2005. But anyway, Jeff Graves was able to draw a 13A tag, and his first mule deer hunt ever, and out west and everything. And we had a great time hunting and stuff. But we were able to kill a 35-inch wide 9x5 that gross scored 215 inches. That was a really memorable hunt. And I stay in contact with Jeff. He's a good friend of mine. And
was that a buck? Brec, was that a buck that you had seen quite a bit and had a history with, or was that a buck that you just found and you got on it and shot it, or what kind of history was that?
We actually saw the buck the day before the hunt. We hadn't seen him at all up until that day before the hunt, and I told Jeff, he was actually back in camp when me and my dad actually saw the buck, and I went back to camp and I said, Jeff, I found the buck you're going to kill, and it took us 5 days before we turned him up again, but finally turned him up and got him killed. And so I told Jeff it was going to be a tough one to beat, and he's been trying ever since and hasn't been able to beat that one. But
that sounds like an awesome buck, 215 buck. And then what are some of the other bucks, Brec?
And then even that same year, just sticking with 2005 since I started with that, Louis Seiko, a Boston native, came out and hunted with us, and we killed a really neat, massive, I think he had 48 inches of mass. He wasn't the highest scoring deer, but he was around, 190, had a bunch of cool eye guards and stuff like that. But that was another neat buck and neat experience.
Were both of those in B or in A?
The Louis Seiko's was actually on 13B, and then Jeff Graves' buck came off of 13A.
Okay.
And then, going back to like the Charringtons, I mean, it was just a phenomenal year. We started off, that's the first year that Arizona offered an archery hunt on the Arizona Strip. Or I shouldn't say the first year. They did, years and years ago, but they hadn't allowed archery hunting on 13B up until 2008. And a really good friend of mine, Chance Gledhill, who I believe you met, Jay, but he actually drew the archery tag and ended up killing a really neat buck. He was super narrow. He was only like 24 inches wide, but ended up gross scoring like 226 inches and some change or something like that. And I had actually seen the buck the week before the hunt started, and we got on him. He actually killed him sitting water, which is obviously a really good on the Strip depending on the weather. The last 2 years it's been tough sitting water just because of the monsoon moisture that we've received. But so we started off that 2008 season with Chance killing that 227, and then obviously the Charringtons came up and hunted with me, and we killed a buck that we had nicknamed Heavy. I'd actually seen him and filmed him, photographed him from '06, so we followed him for a couple years, and '06 he was just a great buck, had the potential, and then in 2007 he blew up into we figured 200, 205 type of deer. And then obviously in 2008, he was even bigger, and he was on our hit list, and we were able to get in and kill him the first day of the hunt, actually. Ron Charrington killed him, and I think he ended up gross scoring around 214 inches or something like that. And then the top buck that we were after, we had nicknamed him Cardiac. And so we hunted for him and actually turned him up the third day and killed him. And those were all on 13B. And then we went from there up on 13A and killed a great 31-inch wide, 190-inch typical with a 100 out of California. So those were, that was just a really memorable year. And then, like you said, obviously Skip this last season, we actually started out hunting a buck that we were hunting with Daniel Franco, and you probably remember seeing the trail camera pictures of him and whatnot, but we nicknamed him, Daniel came up with the nickname of Pitchfork, called him Pitchfork, and so we hunted him really hard with his father-in-law, late father-in-law Chester Crandall, and had a great time hunting and great camp, good people, and that buck ended up winning and is still alive. We hunted him with Skip, obviously this last season, and just lives in a really tough spot that we couldn't turn him up in, and so we ended up switching the game plan up a little bit on day 8 and went in and took the buck that Skip killed, which is a buck that we had followed for I think three or four seasons. We had filmed him, photographed him, had trail camera pictures of him, and this last year was obviously his best year, and he ended up I think Brian had him officially scored SCI and he went like 220, 225 and 3/8 or something like that. So just a great buck, and we hunted hard and finally turned him up and got him killed. But so obviously that was a great buck, and I mean I can rattle on and on and on, but
it's for someone that isn't around those quality of bucks like you are, they all sound just giant, and I'm looking forward to getting my strip tag one day. It just seems like a magical place to be. I want to circle back around and talk about, you mentioned something about sitting water on A and B on the archery hunt. So in general, I want to talk a little bit about the archery hunt, but more specifically, I want to double back to something you said. The last couple seasons have been tough because we've gotten monsoon moisture where when sitting water on the strip, and you chime in at any time, sitting water on the strip, the key to that obviously is to have dry conditions. And right before the hunt and during the hunt, when you have monsoonal flow of moisture, you get those rains, those bucks, they go from you guys getting pictures on the trail camera virtually every day to maybe not coming in for how long, a week to 10 days. Talk about how the timing of that season is hit or miss as far as the moisture.
Okay, yeah. Let's see, what was it? 2013, my brother had actually drawn a 13A archery tag. And it was, we had the bucks coming in. We had, just right down to the, where we thought, okay, it's going to happen. And then the storms came in, and those bucks didn't show back up on water for a month. I mean, it rained that much to where they just didn't need to come to water. And so it's, obviously we're looking for, hot, dry conditions, and which makes the archery hunt, obviously sitting water is a probably going to give you the best opportunity to kill a buck and, get the shot opportunity and whatnot. We obviously do a lot of spot and stalk as well. And, we've had a few bucks that we've killed spot and stalk, but primarily, sitting water is key up here on the strip. And so, we had a buck in 2012. It was actually Trace Porter's buck that he killed. I think it rained 2 inches the day before the hunt started. And, we just kind of stuck with the game plan of having Trace sit the water that we had a particular buck we'd been watching for a couple of years. Had him sit in the water while, everybody else was glassing, trying to turn the buck up. And it took, I think it was day 5 or 6, the buck finally came back into water. It stayed dry long enough for him to want to come in and get a drink. And so that weather is, those archery hunts, they're really tough just because of that weather. You just can't predict, what it's going to do. And not saying that if it rains a lot, I mean, you still have good opportunities, at spot and stalk certain bucks. And so, it is a lot better, in my opinion, if it's hot and dry and you can sit water. It makes for a lot better hunt.
Brec, that's great stuff. I want to ask you about, I know you and some of your competitors up on the strip, I know a bunch of you run a lot of trail cameras. One of the questions I want to ask you is, from a predictability standpoint, how predictable, say, before the season, when it is hot and there's, say you get a 2-week dry spell, are those bucks watering every day, every single day?
No, they're not. Some of the bigger bucks, they'll even with the hot and dry conditions, they'll go, 3 or 4 or 5 days without coming to water, or they're watering at some spot that, there aren't too many, but some spot that I don't know about or whatever. And so,
and then the next question following along with that is, how often, like that buck pitchfork, or, other people have nicknames for them, how often is that buck just completely predictable, and then does his pattern change because, people roll in, and is that why people haven't been able, why other people haven't been able to kill him, because of his changing his pattern?
Yeah, this last year, it's kind of funny. We actually saw him the day before the hunt. Me and my hunter saw a pitchfork during the archery hunt. We saw him in the velvet, and he was right off the side of the road, and that's actually that is the first time I actually saw him, and he just lives in that particular buck lives in a really tough spot. It's really thick, a lot of cover for him and whatnot, but we thought we had a chance, and there was another archery hunter that actually hit him the first day of the hunt, just probably 200 or 300 yards from where we were hunting, and that particular buck actually survived being hit with an arrow. He was hit just a little high and in that void, but so it makes made it I don't know, enticing to try to go back, because he actually did. He changed his pattern obviously after he was hit and moved I don't know, 4 or 5 miles, but then just I don't know, a couple weeks, 2 or 3 weeks before the rifle hunt started, he'd actually moved right back into his same pattern, and so we thought for sure we were going to have an opportunity to get him, but like I say, he just lives in a really tough spot where it's thick and a lot of cover for him, not a lot of great vantage points to glass from and stuff like that. And
how hard is it sometimes, Brec, having cameras all over the units and knowing a bunch of different bucks and their locations? Talk to me a little bit as an outfitter and as a hunter, the mental anguish you go through of trying to decide which buck to hunt, and how much is there a buck that we can actually kill? How much does that play into it? Or do you just go after the biggest one and tell me some of the challenges with knowing about so many good bucks to go after, the turmoil that it causes?
Yeah, it definitely does cause some turmoil. I usually, my outfitting business, it's just, we're small, we don't do it for a living, it's because we love to, we're addicted, if you will. And so, for us, we don't book a ton of hunters, so me personally, I usually let the hunter decide, like with Brian and Skip, I was sending them trail camera pictures and video and whatnot, and just said, hey, we can go after, Pitchfork. He's a tough deer to kill. He's in a tough spot, and we have some of these other bucks that are more killable, just in better country, if you will, more glassing spots, more open, stuff like that. But I personally, I leave it up to the hunter. I say, hey, which deer do you want to go after? I tell them, hey, it's going to be a tough one to kill, or we can get this deer, and stuff like that. And so me personally, it's up to the hunter. I let them decide which deer they want to go after, and obviously our goal is to kill a 200-inch buck, and we've been pretty successful at doing that, and a lot of it is because of the obviously the use of trail cameras. It's a kind of a love-hate relationship with trail cameras. We use them. It gives us the ability to scout the entire unit, both units, 13B, 13A. And the bad thing about them is all the other big outfitters, several of them, they know everything I know, without the use of trail cameras, it would make it better to where we could hunt deer that, other outfitters didn't know about. And so, like I say, I love using them, love getting the pictures and stuff like that, but it's kind of made it to where, we might be hunting the same deer that, 10 other guys are hunting just because of trail cameras. And so,
let me ask you a question in hypothetical here. And I know that, the trail camera thing has been controversial for years and what have you. In my mind, it's a phenomenal scouting tool. I don't use cameras much, but I don't live where you live. So my question to you would be, if they ever made changes to the regulation, which, every year we hear that they're going to do this and they're going to do that, and it doesn't seem like they do anything. If they did, make it where you can use trail cameras all summer long, but the day the season starts or, 2 weeks before the season, all cameras have to be lifted. In your mind, would that make actually for a better hunt as far as maybe not being able to efficiently kill deer, but would it make a little more, spread people out a little bit more?
Yeah, I think it would. Just like I say, you get certain deer. I know that year that you came up, on Daniel Franco's hunt, one of the deer that we actually started out hunting had moved, 20 miles, and we didn't check the camera obviously until after the season. But I think it would help spread people out somewhat. The problem is everybody knows where the biggest bucks are because of trail cameras, and so obviously if they know the strip and know what the deer will do, where they're going to move and whatnot, then it's going to be right there. They'll be right there with you still. But I think it would kind of help spread people out somewhat. Probably not a whole lot, but it would for sure.
And from an outsider looking in, if that were to ever happen, I would certainly think someone like yourself, and there's local guides there, and then there's some that live 200, 300 miles away. I've got to think eventually, if the camera restrictions come in some form or fashion, I think it just goes back to who knows the country the best, and who's putting in the most time, and just back to deer hunting. I think my only thing with trail cameras in general is I don't like to see any of our hunting tools or things we use go away. But I think at some point in time, people feel like they own certain deer. And this is an outsider's perspective. People feel like they own certain deer because they have a picture of them. And I'm not so sure that that's good for hunting, for our legacy and for our tradition. But that's my opinion. Moving on, Brec, what's the biggest mule deer you've ever seen and been involved with, period?
Well, I would say the biggest I've actually filmed, I've seen some giant bucks when I was younger before we, really started filming and stuff like that. But the biggest buck that I've actually seen and been a part of hunting and whatnot was the famous Lucky Buck. You're probably familiar with that buck. But anyway, the year before he was killed, which was 2011, I was guiding Kelly Porter, and her husband Spencer actually came up the week before the hunt to spend the weekend with me on the strip scouting, and we actually glassed Lucky up. So it would have been 2010, and
now, is this A or B?
This is B. This is 13B.
Okay. Okay.
But anyway, we glassed him up, knew he was a heck of a deer. We figured he was probably a 240-plus inch deer. But we glassed him up the week before the hunt. So we hunted him pretty much exclusively for, the first 5 days of the season before we turned up another buck that Kelly ended up killing. And it was a great buck, 200-inch deer. And it was her first deer hunt ever. And so had a phenomenal time, but that year before, we saw him. We weren't able to get any video. We glassed him up at a distance and whatnot. But my brother actually went in there the spring of 2011 and found one shed off of him, one side, and we looked all over the place. Me and my dad, my brother, we've still been looking, but we have just scoured the country trying to find the other side. But so that was kind of cool. And then, my brother kept saying in 2011, he kept saying, Brec, why don't you go, film Lucky or find Lucky? And so I was like, yeah, I'm going to get out there. So anyway, I get out. First day I go out to look for him. I turn him up.
Now this is after the seasons, right?
This is after the season and approaching the 2011 season. This was in the summer. I believe it was like, I don't know the date. End of July, first part of August. But anyway, I go out and I see him, and I'm able to get some phenomenal video. I glassed him at a distance, and he lived in some real tough country, but he and 3 or 4 other bucks that were with him crossed a road and went out in some real thick stuff. So I went down and followed him, just tracked him up, and was able to get within about 100 yards and take some phenomenal video of him. And so anyway, I showed the video to Ryan Hatch with Muley Crazy, who was guiding Alan Hamberlin, who had bought one of the auction tags, and they were hunting a different buck actually up on 13A. And once they saw the video of Lucky, they immediately pulled off, and the hunt began. And Alan, the first day Alan came up to hunt him, we actually turned him up right in the exact same spot that I had seen him, a couple weeks earlier. And we turned him up and got him, glassed him and watched him and whatnot. And I actually watched him bed. And so we kind of put a game plan together, and Ryan and Alan went in on him and got within, I think it was 300 yards. And Alan got a good broadside shot and actually missed him.
Oh man.
Yeah. He's a 268 inch deer or something, almost 42 inches wide. But so that was kind of disheartening for everybody when that went down.
And Alan's known as being a crack shot.
Yeah, he is. I mean, he doesn't miss, And so Ryan, obviously Ryan got it all on video, and it's some phenomenal video. It's in his last video, I think, getting lucky on the strip or something like that. But anyway, it took about, and he was in the velvet at that time. This was in August, and then it took about, I think it was, 3 weeks or a month or something before we were finally able to kill him. And so that was a fun, memorable hunt.
How big did he end up going roughly?
He ended up going, he's a 10 by 10. He's about 41 and a half inches wide, and he ended up gross scoring, I believe, 268 inches or something like that. But he has just a giant frame on him. He's got a 224-inch 4-point main frame, and he has like the biggest back end on a deer I've ever seen. He has like 22-inch G2s and 14, 15-inch 3s and 14, 15-inch 4s, and so just a giant frame deer with
like 40 inches of trash.
Yeah, yep, exactly, yep. So big cheaters, and just what you dream about when you come to the strip to hunt. Just a buck of a lifetime.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. Just an unbelievable deer. Congratulations to the whole group on that. What do you see as far as bucks in the future? I mean, do you know of some growers out there that have chance to be, just lucky caliber type of deer? Obviously they shot some great bucks last year on with some of the auction tags and stuff. Are there some up and comers out there?
There are. There's some giant bucks that made it through the season, and that's one of the reasons I think this coming year, this 2015 season, is going to be phenomenal. There's and those are some of the older mature deer, and then then you've got a lot of these young up and comers that could just blow up, and that's one thing with the strip. I mean, you never know. You could have a 180-inch buck, this last year, 2014, he may turn into a 220-inch deer this coming season, depending on the moisture and whatnot. And so that's just, the genetics and stuff up here on the strip are just unbelievable.
Yeah, and how much, how critical is it from what we have now moisture-wise? Have we passed the most critical point, or do you think there's still, is there a month left where we need storms, or could it, if it just kind of shut off and just kind of stayed with the norm, would it be a phenomenal year, or do we still need more to get it to be phenomenal?
I think we need more to get it to be phenomenal. I think right now, if we just, if say we didn't get another storm, until we start getting the monsoon moisture in the summer, I think with last year's monsoon season during the summer, the moisture we got then, and then the moisture we've received up to this point, I still think we're going to have an above average year. But I think if we could get some, 2 or 3 good storms, I think it could be a phenomenal year as far as, antler growth and the feed and stuff like that. But
that's awesome. I want to talk a little bit about the gear that you use and that you have used. As far as camera gear, are you shooting most stuff with the still camera, or using a video camera? What do you use to photograph and video these deer?
I have multiple cameras, but my primary cameras that I use is a little Panasonic, and I can't remember the model number, HDC 1000 or something like that. That's what I use for filming, and then I have a Canon SLR 60D camera that I use for still photography. And I'm wanting to upgrade. Canon came out with I believe it's a 70D that actually has autofocus autofocusing, which will be great because then I could just use it for filming and photographing. With I have a 500 millimeter lens that I use. It's not one of the high end lenses, but it does a pretty good job. But go.
And you have a lot of photos and videos on your website. Can you tell me what your website is? I believe it's muledeeraddiction.com, or what's your website?
Yes, it is. It's muledeeraddiction.com. And then also, we do quite a bit of stuff on Facebook. Haven't as of late, but it's just if you look for MDA Outfitters on Facebook, you can find us on Facebook as well. And then we're also on Instagram. I kind of enjoy Instagram. It's kind of fun. You can just throw up a photo, and get people excited and stuff.
So is it MDA Outfitters on Instagram?
It is. Yep.
Okay, MDA. It's at MDA Outfitters on Instagram. I follow you and enjoy seeing your photos. Okay, so that's camera equipment. As far as glassing, are you into the long-range glasses yet, or what are you using for binoculars?
For binoculars, me and my dad, we both use the Leica Duovids, and the reason being, it's not that they're maybe the best glass, but we have a pair of 10 and 15, right there at our disposal, rather than having most of my brother and some of my friends and stuff that guide for me. They're using Swarovski, the new 1556 HD SLCs, and I mean, just a phenomenal glass, that Swarovski. And so I've stuck with the Leica Duovids, like I say, just because I have that ability. I have 10 and 15 just with the twist of an eyepiece, and so that's what we use. And then we all use Swarovski spotting scopes, and we are into the long range glass. We have three pairs of the Kowa Highlanders, and they're just phenomenal. 32. I've just got the 32 times eyepieces. My brother's got the 50s as well. But you just can't go wrong with those Kowas. They're just an unbelievable glass. If you're going to be looking, at long ranges, 3, 4, 5, 6 miles out, you can't beat them.
Yeah, I mean, I used to use the Doctor, the 40 super wide angles, and really liked them. But then as soon as I looked through the Kowas, although I gave up 8 power, the clarity, the edge-to-edge clarity, and just the crispness of the Kowas is fantastic. And you can vouch for this. I mean, I tell people that I can look at a deer, an elk, or a sheep sometimes a couple miles away, and I can tell you what it is, and they're like, no way. I'm like, well, okay, look, get a pair yourself and look through it. I mean, you can tell whether it's a buck or, a ram or something you need to go after for sure. I mean, you always need your spotting scope to really get definition, but the big binoculars definitely, in my book, takes it to a whole new level.
Yes, it does. I mean, there's no question. When I'm kind of like you. I looked through a pair of Doctors, and they weren't. I actually about bought a pair of fixed 40 power pair of Doctors, and they just weren't super comfortable on my eye. And I mean, they're great glass, but then I looked through a pair of the Kowas, and I was like you. I was sold on them. I mean, they're just phenomenal. But and like you say, you're never going to be able to give up that your spotting scope. But at the same time, when you're looking for hours and hours, through these big binoculars, I mean, you just can't beat it. We actually, my brother glassed up a buck bedded a couple years ago with the Kowas, the 32 times eyepieces at 4 miles away. The buck was bedded, and like you say, he couldn't, he knew it was a good buck that we needed to take a look at, but without that's when you put your spotting scope on, crank the power up to 60, and you can get in on them pretty tight and get a good idea of what they are. But yeah, it's crazy. 2-3 miles out, that's definitely within the realm of glassing with the big binoculars. And even beyond that, you can 4 or 5 miles out, you can at least get eyes on the deer. So.
Absolutely. Brec, what kind of UTV or ATVs? What are you running? What are you running up there?
Well, I've run pretty much everything, but when I first bought an ATV, I was a Honda guy, which you can't go wrong with the Hondas. I mean, they're a great machine, but I went from a Honda Foreman, which is like a 400 or 450 or whatever. I went from that to a Honda Rubicon, which was a 500, and then after that I actually switched. I rode a Yamaha Grizzly and was sold on it. Power steering and the suspension and whatnot. I mean, it was a great four-wheeler. But now obviously I'm running side-by-sides, which just gives you the ability to carry all your gear and everything. But I was running up until just around the first of the year. I was running a Can-Am Commander, which was a great machine, and I put a lot of miles on it. But my brother Bronson got a Razor, 4-seat Razor, and I drove in that thing, and I was sold from the minute I got in it. And so I ended up selling my Can-Am and just bought a 4-seat Razor 1000. So
awesome. Yeah, Rimses have one, and they say that Ryan really likes it. I haven't ridden in one yet, but I hear they're just fantastic. Yeah, what kind of tires? Let's talk about miles for a second and tell me about tires, because I think I remember when I was in your camp, you said you put the amount of miles you told me you put on 1 year it blew my mind on a I think it was on your Can-Am.
Yeah. I mean, I put, like my Can-Am that I just sold, I think I had, I want to say I had around 4,000 or 5,000 miles on it, and I'd only had it for about a year or something like that. And so, we rack up the miles. My old Grizzly that I was saying, the Yamaha Grizzly, I think when I traded it in to get the side-by-side, I think I had like 10 or 12,000 miles on it, and so it's just crazy the amount of miles that we run, just even in a weekend. I'm out pretty much I spend 2 or 3 days a week on the strip, from, obviously usually Easter, because I'll take my family out and we spend time at our property up on 13A and stuff. But so from Easter on clear through December, January, we're just racking up the miles, whether it's on our side-by-sides or our trucks. We put a lot of miles on. But the tires, obviously the strip, it's known for chewing up tires, and it does too. It'll eat up tires in a hurry. But I've been running the last several years. I've been running the Toyo MT, the Toyo Mud Terrain, and they've just been an excellent tire. They're a 10-ply rated tire, and when I get out there on the strip, I'll air them down to 12 pounds of pressure in the tire, and it rides a lot better, and it handles, makes it so you're not as likely to get a hole in the actual tread, but you are in the sidewall. But it's just a really well constructed tire that takes the abuse of the strip roads.
And let's be honest about this. Those tires are set at that pressure, so when you go around those corners as fast as you do, that you're still on all four wheels and don't go on two wheels.
That's for sure.
Have you found a tire in the UTVs? Have you found a tire that's better than others?
I prefer the Maxxis tires, and that's what a lot of these side-by-sides are coming with now, is the Maxxis Bighorn. I had really good luck on my Can-Am with all the miles I put on it. I was still on the factory set of tires, which were Maxxis Bighorns, and that's same with the Razor. It comes with the Maxxis Bighorns, and so I've been a fan of those. I mean, they're a good tire for ATVs, for side-by-sides, whatever. They've been a phenomenal tire.
Brec, tell me what's your advice to someone that cannot afford a guide on the strip, whether it be archery or rifle, as far as preparation, and give me a little bit of advice to someone that can afford a guide, what they should be prepared for, and how many spare tires should they take, and give me a little bit of background on that.
Okay, yeah, I would say to anybody that's going to do it on their own, obviously spend as much time as possible up here. I mean, it's you get up here and it's just there's so much country, it's so vast, and there's not a lot of deer. I mean, the strip is not known for the number of deer. I mean, the deer density is really low. And so obviously the biggest thing would be to get up here, scout it, as hard as you can, run a few trail cameras if you can, if you can afford to, run a few cameras, talk to as many people as possible, get some ideas on where you want to start, looking and whatnot. and then just put the time in. I mean, that's key. I mean, for us, we're doing it 2-3 days a week. And so that's, a lot of the reason we've been as successful is we spend that time and get to know the deer. We know where they're moving and whatnot. And so for somebody doing it on their own, I would say, come up, scout it as much as possible. Always bring as much fuel as possible, and spare tires.
Like when you say that, I mean, I talked to a guy, he's like, I'm headed to the Strip and I have, 2 gas cans. And I'm like, 2 gas cans? That's going to get you maybe back to town. But you're talking get 50 gallons of gas, right?
Exactly. That's, I think on this last hunt with the Rimses, I had hauled 70 gallons worth of fuel out, and so, and it just depends. I mean, if you're going to be hunting closer, you can hunt just 30 minutes out of St. George, and there's some great country, and some great bucks. And so it just depends, from year to year. Obviously there's some great bucks up here on the north end. And then, some years you go south, and like you said, south is 90 miles from any gas station, and so as much fuel as possible. Yeah, I'd say 50 gallons, 60 gallons if you're going to be hunting that far out. But
Gotcha. Yeah, it's definitely one of those things, a strip tag, when you start weighing your own personal trips up there and scouting and the amount of fuel there and back, and, you start weighing all that, and then you weigh in the price for a guide, it's like, when you really pencil it out, paying for a guide on the Arizona Strip, in my mind, seems like one of the most reasonable things that there is. It's not like, you got a Unit 9 elk tag where you got, Tuesday on right there and you got food and gas and everything right there. I mean, you're talking about way out in the middle of nowhere, and I think some people, until they get up there, they don't understand the vastness of it.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, and once you do, you get up here and I can't imagine me myself coming up, and I'm a kind of do-it-yourself type guy myself, as far as hunting, in Utah or wherever it may be. But like you say, and that's why a lot of guys that I've actually guided, they start putting the pencil to the paper and adding up what it's going to cost in fuel to drive up from, Phoenix or wherever it may be, from California or whatever. And it's just, the cost for a guided hunt is actually less than what it would cost them to scout it and do it right, and scout it hard. And so.
Yeah. Brec, let's talk a little bit about what it takes to make a trophy mule deer in your mind, and some of the things that, little tips and things that obviously someone sees a 260-inch, lucky buck, they're going to go, yeah, that's big. But from a field judging standpoint, I mean, what are you looking for to get to the, say the magical 200 number, or, more in general, are there some certain frame-wise, height, width? What are you looking for that makes bucks that you're going after?
Yeah, we, width, back when I was a kid, and you probably remember, it was always width. Everybody wanted a 30-inch wide buck. That was the thing that everybody hunted for, was a 30-inch buck. And now it's kind of got to the point where, it's, hey, I want a 200-inch deer or whatever. And so width is kind of out the window. Like I was telling you with Chance Gledhill's buck, I mean, it was a 227-inch buck that was only 24 inches wide. But what we're looking for is obviously time length. Taking a look at the main frame of the buck. How long are his G2s? How long are his G3s? His 4s? His beams? Stuff like that. And then obviously the mass. What kind of mass does he have? And it's that's one thing about the Strip. I mean, these deer are known to be just massive. Have a lot of mass and weight to them and stuff, and so that's kind of what we look at, and with the use of obviously trail cameras and then deer that we filmed and photographed, we can sit here on our computer and analyze them to death sometimes, and kind of get an idea of score, and it makes it really nice when you're going after bucks that and you've put the numbers on them, and usually we're pretty close. We try to stay on the lower end and be surprised. It's like with Skip's deer, we had no idea. We knew he was a great buck, and we knew he was, we figured he was probably 215 or somewhere right in there, and just couldn't get him anything over that. And then, we get him on the ground and obviously tape him out, and every measurement was longer than what we had thought, and so,
And speaking specifically about that buck, over time. I've had it happen to me several times where bucks that have quite a bit of mass, the mass hides the length of the points. And in Skip's buck in particular, 225 or whatever it ended up at, did the mass hide the length in the photos? That's my first question. And the second question is, do you think trail camera pictures actually make most deer look smaller?
Yes, they do for sure. But I think I'm totally with you. The mass hides length big time. And these strip deer, people don't realize these strip deer, like for instance here in Utah, the deer have 24-inch ears tip to tip. These strip deer, I've seen deer that have had 28-inch ears tip to tip, and so it can be really deceiving how big the deer actually is, But trail cameras, I mean, they can be so deceiving. If you have a side view or a head down angle on a deer, it just doesn't do them justice. You've got to get a good head on photo of them, looking in the camera to be able to really put the numbers to them, and obviously in Skip's buck's case, we had 3 years worth of video of him, and I'd actually seen him just a couple weeks before the hunt started and got some pretty good video, and then my good friend Brett that guides for me, Brett Simonson, he saw him just a couple days before the hunt, and he says that, looking at him in the glass, he could tell that he was probably bigger than what we were coming up with as looking at the trail camera photo, but.
Yeah, I mean, I mass and with elk and with deer, mass hides a lot of length. I mean, there's been a lot of cases where animals are much bigger than I thought, and when you walk up, you realize how heavy they are, and it just makes those points just look shorter. Yeah, that's all good stuff. But point length, number one in your book is looking at point length and having good separation between the points and good main beams and point length.
Correct. Yep, absolutely. Look at starting with the G2, if you get a G2 that's 18 inches long, you've got a great start. And then obviously, the split, where the G3 splits off the 2, and stuff like that, you can get a good idea of what the buck is,
Yeah, and sometimes when a buck has crabby, front forks, talk to me about some of the deceiving part of, crabby bucks. How do you feel like if a G4 actually kind of parallels the main beam and it looks crabby, have you seen that where actually the G4 is longer than you think? It's just not pointing up. It's more pointing at a parallel level with the beam. Have you seen that?
We have. We've seen that, and on one buck in particular that I've seen the last 2 or 3 years, he's an old deer, and he's, same thing. He's not going to be a super, super high scoring buck, but he's got the width, he's got the mass that, like we've talked about, hides some of his length. But I think he's really deceiving because of that. His G4 kind of parallels the beam, and it makes it look like he's really crabby and not, doesn't have that long of a G4. When in reality, if you were to get him on the ground, I think he's one of those deer that would surprise you and score a lot better than you think, And so there's definitely a lot of, I wouldn't say a lot of bucks, that we're looking at that look crabby, but there are bucks out there like that are deceiving because of that.
Absolutely. Well, Brec, it's been an awesome hour spending it here with you, and it's obvious why your outfitting business is mule deer addiction, because knowing you personally, I just know you live and breathe these deer, and my hat's off to you for the success that you've had, and more importantly, my hat's off to you to the guy and the character that you have, and I look forward to seeing you again, and I'd like to check back in with you maybe in midsummer and just see how the bucks are growing and get a little update from you, and hopefully between now and when we talk again, we'll get a bunch more rain and just have a unbelievable banner year, and just want to thank you for being with us, and once again have you tell my listeners where they can find you, how they can contact you, and And thanks for being with us.
Oh, you bet, Jay. It was a pleasure. It's always good talking with you. But your listeners can get a hold of me through my website. It's muledeeraddiction.com, or they can check us out on Facebook, MDA Outfitters, or Instagram, MDA Outfitters, and get a hold of us that way.
Sounds great, buddy. Well, you tell the family hello, and we'll hope for more moisture and big antlers ahead.
Hey, sounds good, Jay.
All right, buddy. Take care. Thanks for being with us.
Hey, you too. Thanks.
Well, what an awesome show with Mr. Brec Bundy of Mule Deer Addiction Outfitters out of Utah. The guy knows the Strip like the back of his hand. He's just a high-class individual. Want to really thank him for being with us. I want to thank you, our listeners at J. Scott Outdoors Podcast, for listening. And if you like what you're hearing, go on iTunes and give us a 5-star rating. That helps us. And if you have any questions or comments, you can send them directly to me at jscottoutdoors@gmail.com. You can continue to follow on our website our progress at jscottoutdoors.com. You can follow on Instagram at jscottoutdoors. We have a YouTube channel that's people like, and that's J. Scott Outdoors. You can also find us on our Facebook page, J. Scott Outdoors. And just want to thank all our listeners. I also want to put a shout out there to Corby Taylor with Wild Game Hunting Podcast. Just a great guy. He actually did an interview with me over the summer, which was my first podcast. I was a guest on his show. And if you haven't already tuned into his podcast, you should. Wild Game Hunting Podcast, Corby Taylor. He just has a real popular show and does a great job, and is a great guy. So I want to thank him for all of his support and for his help with creating this podcast. And until next time, guys, God bless.